Sorry about that, babe.
Another one that's been on the shelves for quite some time, the 7th Saga for the SNES. 7th Saga is a turn-based role-playing game that was developed by Produce and published by Enix. Released in Japan in April of 1993 as Elnard, which I'll touch on briefly later, and also released in North America in September of 1993 as the 7th Saga. The story. As the North American title would suggest, in the 7th Saga you're able to choose from one of 7 playable characters, all with their own class, stats, style, whatever you want to call it, on a quest for the 7 magical runes. The game takes place in the world of Tichondra, where 5,000 years ago, good guy Sorrow defeated bad guy Gorcia with the power of said 7 runes. The son of Sorrow, King Lemel, sets the stage as the game begins, instructing the 7 apprentices after 5 years of training.
You get your ass out there and you find
those
fucking
runes. Whoever is able to find all the runes is set to become the heir to Lemel. The king also graciously gives a crystal ball to each apprentice, which I'll touch on later, and off you go. There's a few twists and turns along the way, especially with the ending, and all in all, the story was adequate enough. Even if fairly simple in its premise, and rather in your face with its delivery, no real issues here from me. The graphics. Alright, so the 7th Saga Slurpfest begins. Aside from some gameplay mechanics and replay value, this is perhaps where the 7th Saga shines the brightest. Simply put, the graphics are really good. Sure, the towns, NPCs, overworld, and so on aren't necessarily the most amazing things that I've ever seen, but I'd be lying if I said they didn't look good. I mean, heck, even if you think the towns look and feel are a bit run-of-the-mill, the variety of the layouts of the towns can keep you on your toes and bring freshness to your journey. But really, where the 7th Saga separates itself are the sprites of the 7 apprentices, the battle transition, and the battles themselves. The in-battle sprite work in this game is awesome. Some truly unique, mythical, and at times grotesque creatures await. The in-battle sprite work of your apprentice is fluid, whether you are attacking or using magic, and though admittedly probably much cooler back in 1993, the use of the Mode 7 graphic effects between the overworld and dungeon screens, and then going into battle, it's just super cool. The word to focus on here for the graphics is unique. You know that it's the 7th Saga from looking at it, and it's not a bad point of recognition, clearly. Also worth noting, in the Japanese version of the game, there were many sprites that were different, more mature in nature, basically naked. So if you want to take a glance at Wilmy's butt cheeks, go ahead and fire that baby up. Music and sound. So for my first playthrough, I got about a third of the way through the game while streaming before having some personal issues arise where I then restarted as a new character, which is the playthrough that you probably have seen on my channel. Anyway, I remember saying during my streams that I really enjoyed the music and sound. The sound effects are nothing crazy, but I feel like the weight of the battle actions are felt in the sound delivery. Even if walking around in towns as Lux can get annoying with the incessant clanking, I don't really have much of an issue with the sound design. But the music? Incredibly enjoyable. My main takeaway was, if you go into this expecting some Nobuo Uematsu masterpiece or something out of Secret of Mana, you'll probably be disappointed. You're not getting these insanely long, epic scores. But what you do get are incredibly catchy, enjoyably loopy, and atmospheric tracks. Some of my favorite tracks include that of the intro, which even if you didn't play the game as a kid, it sort of instills this feeling of deep longing nostalgia, peace and carefree days, a truly beautiful piece that touched my gaming soul. Some other tracks that stood out to me were the ones dubbed Isuna Busy, heard in many castle-type areas and towns, the cave or dungeon theme titled Frozen Depths of the Earth, and the immense amount of overworld and battle themes, which, by the way, small, sure, done in other RPGs, but I did love the variety in those themes changing as you further progress into the game. Composer Norihiko Yamanouchi did a great job of crafting a soundtrack that's not too show-stealing, but memorable nonetheless. The controls. Again, since this is a turn-based RPG, the controls aren't incredibly paramount in the hierarchy of game reviewing. And on the whole, they are basically fine, average, run-of-the-mill, whatever you want to call it. But I do have a few bits to speak on. I feel like the exploration aspect of the controls are good. You have the ability to dodge encounters pretty consistently unless you're in an enclosed space, and moving your way through the towns is easy enough. I also found the menuing to be quite easy to navigate and quickly became second nature when in battle. Really, the only gripe that I had seemed to be with a slight menu frame delay when opening the menu, let's say in a dungeon or on the overworld. That delay could sometimes get you into a battle when you thought for sure you were going to open that chest first, but it wasn't necessarily anything egregious enough to outright complain about. I just felt like it was worth a mention. Gameplay and fun factor. The 7th Saga is a game that is known for its difficulty, and sure, it's not easy by any stretch of the imagination. But the way that the game lays things out to you and the tools that it has, I feel offer a good counter to said difficulty as long as you stay the course. The aforementioned crystal ball from King Lemel allows you to actively see encounters on a minimap, giving you the opportunity, at times, to dodge and completely avoid battles. But for the battles that you can't dodge, The 7th Saga offers challenging fights. At times they can be endurance battles. There's lots of thinking. Making a misclick can spell your doom, and of course there can be maddening RNG, but all in all, I really loved the battle system. For auto battle or mindless battle enthusiasts, this is not the game for you. You have to stay engaged, and on the whole, I enjoyed that. The battling itself boils down to some simple tactics. The majority of the time, you're going to want to focus on various buffs to your characters through either consumable bottle items, magic spells, or reusable runes, casting attacking or healing spells, running if you're scared, and if you're physically attacking, taking advantage of the defend and then attack mechanic, which essentially doubles your damage output. At first that might seem a little weird or cryptic, but it's actually told to you in the opening town. Which brings me to my next point. I felt like the translation job was pretty good. Not a lot of bad dialogue or flow. Some interesting moments throughout the script, such as the follow-up after the Romus boss battle, and you could basically figure out where you need to go at all times, just by adequate exploration and talking to townsfolk. Another very important thing that I want to mention is the penalty for dying and how to counter it effectively. You're gonna die. A lot. Especially if it's your first playthrough. The penalty for death in this game is to go back to your last save spot or town, and you lose half your gold. In a game where money is needed for various things, and with it being this difficult, that's gotta be frustrating. Well, thankfully you were able to purchase various jewels and gems for a certain amount, which you could then sell back to the item, armor, or weapon shops for the same exact amount. It's sort of like a zero interest loan or something. It's a failsafe to make sure that you don't lose all your fat stacks when you inevitably get one-shotted by some random encounter 10 minutes from now. Some other small things that I wanted to highlight include the following. I felt like the game gave off some pretty strong Phantasy Star vibes at times. Not sure if it's because of the tetragens, or just the behind-the-back battle style or what, but I felt it and I liked it. Also throughout your journey you get important items like the said runes, a world map, and so forth, and thankfully the game won't let you accidentally drop or sell them. Lord knows if it did, I would have had to reset a few times by my fat-fingered menuing. And lastly, there were a few gimmick fights in the game, and all in all I enjoyed most of them. That includes the apprentice battles. Mostly. I also wanted to give a shout out to the funny Python battles and their dialogue and presentation. Just an overall good time. Critiques. Now, as much as I enjoy the game, I can admit that there is quite a bit wrong with it. First, let's start with the butchered localization in terms of gameplay. Like I said, I felt like the translation and flow of the game was fine and dandy, but the numbers don't quite add up in the North American release. The gist of it is this: the stat gains were reduced in the North American version compared to the LNAR Japanese release. At times it could actually be harder to have a companion because the experience gained is split in half and thus you level up half as fast as you would solo. But worse off, the overall experience reduction was not applied to your rival apprentices. Most notably the second apprentice fight. This can serve as a bit of a soft lock to beginner players who might overlevel prior to that fight and then find themselves in a 1v1 essentially unwinnable battle against a god mode character. Sure, there's workarounds, I made a short about it, but it's quite annoying. Also in the North American version, your stat growth and abilities go at a slower rate, and all in all it's just quite sloggy. There's a crap ton of encounters. Early on you don't want to overlevel, and then after the second apprentice battle you basically have to overlevel. Experience growth takes quite a while and it can become incredibly annoying. Coupled with the need for overgrinding is the fact that everything in this game is so dang expensive in the realm of armor and weapons. Even if you don't want to grind for the experience, you need to grind anyway in order to properly gear your characters. Unless of course you're someone like Lux, who for example doesn't really gear up much at all, the bank account will go down quick in the 7th Saga. Even when reviving a character, buying healing, protection, and buffing consumables, trust me, the money goes quick. Also briefly, item storage space is kind of an issue, capping you off at a max of 9, which for a game that could be sloggy, grindy, and difficult, would have been nice if you could have stacked a few more M-herbs and potions along the way. Touching back on the gimmick fights, again all in all I liked them, but they weren't perfect. The two that really stick out to me are a boss later in the game that is really only weak to a certain type of magic. I legit had to hit this dude for 1 damage over and over for 45 minutes straight due to my character group and level. I'm not kidding. And even though I do hate spoiling, the Doros fight is a gimmick fight that requires a certain item to unveil his weakness, and it's very easily missed as I missed it completely on my first go around. But to be fair, if you do explore every nook and cranny entirely, it's not so out of the way or hidden that I consider it complete BS. Nonetheless, it's still a gimmick fight that can be a pain in the rear without proper exploration, as there's no real heads up prior. Another gripe that I have with the 7th Saga is the enemy balancing and placement. It's very odd at times. You'll be in endgame areas, and there will be enemies from hours ago that hit you like a gnat bite at that point, and then the very next encounter will be some super fast enemy that you could never hit, or a litany of insta-kill spell spamming enemies that test your mental health. I found the final areas of the game to have annoying encounters, even with a decent amount of grinding, and at times the bosses were easier than the encounters. What gives? Replay value. I wanted to single this section out, but I'll keep it quick. To me, the 7th Saga has extremely good replay value even without a New Game Plus cycle. The reason being, the character variety. You have the choice of 7 characters. Then you have the choice of joining up, RNG based of course, with other apprentices throughout your journey, leading to a multitude of possible combinations, or you could just fly solo. And the best part? Depending on whoever your lead character is, whether it be the originally chosen character, or if your lead character dies and your partner is now in the quote lead, you could have new paths that open up that are entirely character dependent. For example, Olvan gets access to a lot of Olvan specific areas. Late in the game, Asuna is able to get a free plane ride which normally costs $7,000, or you could sneak on sketchily, and Lux is able to get a full-on stat upgrade. There's other instances that I'm not mentioning here, but the point is there's a lot of different roadways available to the final destination. I will 100% be replaying the vanilla version of this game at some point in the future. In summation, for years all I heard was the 7th Saga is too hard, it's broken, it's too grindy, it's a test of will, and so on. And I mean, yeah, it kind of is at times. But I'd be damned if I didn't have a blast with it. An RPG with great, memorable graphics, a solid soundtrack, a decent enough story and set of dialogue, character and story path variety, a great difficulty with intense battles. I mean, it's right up my alley. Sure, it's a bit broken, a bit weirdly paced, especially towards the end. I feel like the two biggest flaws of the game are the apprentice way out leveling you, and then splitting the experience you have with your party member. But other than that, I don't really have many complaints. As such, I give the 7th Saga on the SNES a 9 out of 10. Yeah, I actually enjoyed it that much. And it might be a bit of a hot take, but I'm rolling with it. I can certainly see myself replaying this in the future, as well as trying out some Elnard style ROM hacks and patches to make the game a bit more streamlined, or even the 7th Saga randomizer, which features optional tweaks to things like your character's walking speed, gold gained, and experience, where you could basically beat the game in only a few hours. When you combine all of these things together, I mean, dang, you have a pretty tight and replayable RPG, don't you? If you've enjoyed this review, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing. If you want to check out my 7th Saga related content, check out the pinned comment, description, or the end screen. Take care.